So thanks for the kind words, Marco. Herbert, you're the CFO of Beekeeper. Beekeeper is a producer of workforce management software with over 200 employees, over 100 million in capital raised, and targeting a revenue of 50 million. Now, the fun part is that you started as a flirting platform for students.
That's right.
That's quite a pivot. Can you explain, please, how it came to that?
Of course, gladly. It's a true story. So Beekeeper started out as a flirting app for students. It was founded by some students from ETH in St. Gallen. And while the flirting app did have some traction, there were cool parties, it was not really a successful commercial business. And at that time, our co-founder and CEO, Chris, he actually had a day job at Accenture to make some money to fund the company and worked at the startup at night and on the weekends. And the pivot came when one day a Swiss hotel approached the founders and said, guys, you do something with communities, something with communication. Can you please build me an employee app? And they said, absolutely. They had no idea about that, but they really needed the money. Yeah? And so they said, yes, we can do it. And this is how they entered that beautiful world of frontline workers. And they realized that the world of blue-collar and white-collar workers is so different. It's like playing two different sports, let's say baseball and tennis. Different rules, different boundary conditions. And at the end of the day, people need different software tools for that.
What did Beekeeper learn from the time when you still were a dating platform?
I think one thing we learned that great UI and UX is critical, especially for that demographic. If you think about blue-collar frontline workers, you need to have a front end, a UI UX that's as simple as a Facebook and WhatsApp, but in the back end, it needs to have the power and capabilities of enterprise software.
And is it fair to assume that the name Beekeeper still stems from the time when you've been a dating platform?
That's not true. It actually came later, good question. So the name Beekeeper came about because Beekeeper provides maybe a similar role to organization as a beekeeper does to a beehive. So we want to provide organizations with some of the tools and resources they need to have their employees engaged, happy, and productive.
All right. So can you briefly explain, very briefly, what your app does?
Gladly. Beekeeper is an employee app targeted at blue-collar or frontline workers. And we provide those workers on their phone with a suite of digital tools around communication, collaboration, productivity, and HR.
Okay. And who are your customers? Who do you typically serve? Yeah.
So we have more than 1,200 customers in more than 100 countries. And some of the names you might recognize in hospitality, for example, is Marriott and Hilton. In manufacturing, it's ABB. In retail, it's Dufry or the Hudson Group. They run all the duty-free shops at the airport. And in Switzerland, if you go and buy groceries, it would be Coop, the large retailer.
All right. The Swiss startup scene has been quite upset by the pandemic. What did the pandemic mean for Beekeeper?
It was an interesting time, and I did have some sleepless nights. Yeah? When we entered the pandemic, most of our customers were in hospitality and retail, and those were really, really affected by that. But at the end of the year, we actually had a quite successful year and grew 50%. And I think for us, there were two lessons. Lesson number one was we really had to stay agile and flexible during the year. And we shifted go-to-market very fast from retail and hospitality to healthcare, for example, and we managed to win quite a few large hospitals here in Switzerland. The second lesson, and we still benefit today, I think there was a structural acceleration for the whole frontline space. Before the pandemic, most of the frontline workers were a bit invisible. Yeah, and it was only during the pandemic that people started to speak about the essential worker who really keeps our economy running. And this led to increased tech investment, and we're benefiting from that today.
So at the end of the day, the pandemic was a blessing for you?
It wasn't without challenges, yeah, but from a business perspective, I think it helped us and our peers because there's more investment, yes.
If you look back at all the journey you've done over the last 9 years, what were the most critical situations in the company's history?
Yeah. There was probably ahead of the Series B in 2018. Yeah? So the company was running out of money. Startups sometimes do. Yeah? And we had about 3 weeks of runway left. And we're fortunate at that moment to get a term sheet on the table from a lead investor for $10 million. All that was left was the confirmatory DD. We went into that, and in that DD, we realized that there was an absolute cultural misfit with that investor who had put forward the term sheet. Yeah? That person was swearing at employees, shouting at them, bullying them, using the F word more than anything else. And it wasn't an easy decision, but we actually decided to pull out and not go through. And the founders and the team put their last savings into the company to buy some runway. And at the end of the day, one of our board members, Robert from Keen Ventures in the Netherlands, stepped up, led the round, and we made it to here.
Can you name that investor?
I would not do that, no.
Okay. So how would you then describe the company culture if this was such a misfit with what seems to be a Wall Street attitude?
That's one of the things we don't want to compromise on culture. That's right, yeah, and it's very important to us. And I think I have to applaud Chris and the founders to how they built that culture, because from the moment I entered, I felt this was really one of the most healthiest cultures I've ever experienced. We have 4 values. All are B puns. We love B puns. So one is be open with 2 E's. It's about listening to each other, being open to learning, and also it's okay to fail. The second one is be frontline first. We want to be customer-centric and always think about our customer first. It's about be the solution, being proactive, and be stronger together, really work as a team.
Probably the majority of Swiss startups would subscribe this, but what do you actually do to foster this culture?
If you summarize all of that, we sometimes say no politics, no bullshit.
Okay.
Yeah? So we really try to be honest to each other and work without ego as much as possible.
Okay. There is a shortage of IT specialists all over Europe. What do you do to recruit them? How do you make yourself attractive?
Yeah, so we have 2 engineering hubs. One is here in Zurich, the other is in Krakow in Poland. And from the very beginning, we've tried to get close to universities. So we're not a Google, we're not an AWS, we can't pay those salaries, so we have to find different ways of attracting talent. One is that we try to be very present on these university campuses and have very strong connections with those universities. And through that, we have quite good employer branding. Yeah? That's one thing. The second thing is that many of our employers really love our product. And they feel that it's exciting to build maybe a software tool that's a first in a category. It's not the 15th CRM or the 20th ERP, but it's a first frontline success system. The second thing there is that many people feel really have a purpose. We help frontline workers who are underserved, who lack digital tools to, at the end of the day, live a better life every day and have help there. And that's inspiring to many of our employees.
All right. What was the most surprising thing that happened to you over this journey?
The most surprising thing?
Yeah.
The most surprising thing was probably COVID. Yeah, in the beginning I thought we're in deep trouble. Yeah, and the fact that we could shift on our heels and end the year stronger than before, that was lucky maybe.
Okay. And what was the best advice that you received during your journey?
Best advice also from Robert, my board member from Keen Ventures. He said, don't run out of money. Yeah, I think my job as a CFO is to ensure that there's always a little bit of cash left, yeah, and that we always have conversations with investors.
That wouldn't be too difficult to guess.
Yeah, but it's really thinking ahead. And he was one of the guys also when the party was really going on, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Yeah, and he was one of the guys who said, let's stay a little bit humble and not be as aggressive with hiring as others. Yeah? And we went never that crazy on the hiring and with too crazy plans. And I think while at that time we didn't then have that hyper growth, in the downturn that really helped us and gave us more flexibility and a cushion.
All right. You just mentioned the difficulties you had in raising money in Series B in 2019. Now, the last time you raised money was November last year, and that was the time when the tech stocks already were way down, and with this also the valuations of the startups. Was that also a difficult circumstance to raise money for you?
So that's right. We announced our Series C. It was 50 million last November, and it did take me longer than I thought, yeah, and wanted. And I think it's a mix of market, certainly, but it's also driven by that we didn't want to compromise on type of partner or terms. So we did actually have some term sheets before that had a higher valuation sometimes, and we said no, either because the partner we felt was not the perfect fit, or because there was a lot of structure in the term sheet. Yeah, and we didn't want to go down that road. It was really important to keep clean terms.
Okay. And is it fair to assume that the majority of the money came from abroad?
Let me think. It's probably 50-50.
Okay.
Yeah? So we went pretty early to the US, 2016 or so, and have been having US investors since that time, and it was probably 50-50.
Okay. We just heard the presentation of Klaus and the fact that there's hardly any money around here for later series, even though Switzerland is a rich country. What can be done to change the situation, to make life easier for startups here?
I think that actually good businesses can raise. And I think there's good examples also from the Swiss ecosystem, like a Yokoi that could raise with Sequoia, like Anybotics that could raise with Bessemer. So I think it got better over time, and I think it used to be to access US markets like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you need to be a US company. It was very, very hard for European companies. But I think that has shifted somehow, and by now US investors also are open and have experience investing in Europe and Switzerland.
Okay. The last capital you raised, what will you use it for?
We use it for financing burn, frankly. Yeah, so we're not profitable yet. We're on the path. Q1 next year will be the first quarter where we're cash flow positive. So that's a big milestone for us. And on the way there, investments in sales and marketing and platform. Yeah, like in software, you're never done. Yeah, there's always a good thing that you could build more. Software product is never done.
And what does AI mean for your business? And is it fair to assume that you're investing there as well?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. It's I think on the one hand, the problems we solve for our customers are sometimes basic. Yeah, for example, frontline workers do not have email addresses. Yeah, so it's very hard for businesses to reach them. And we had prospects in COVID that came to us and said, I can't reach my people. I need to send a letter, physical mail, to tell them factory is closed tomorrow, don't come to work. Yeah? That's the state of digitization in many of businesses still today in the blue-collar world. And that's pretty far away from AI. No? Like there's a lot of stuff you can do also without AI. That being said, what's interesting is that with Beekeeper, you digitize processes that were on paper or in the real world, and you bring them for the first time in a digital world, which means you create new data that wasn't there before. And there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do with that new data.
But what actually do you do with
okay.
data?
So for example, we can run sentiment analysis. So Beekeeper, one part of the product is communication, employees speaking to each other, different teams speaking to each other, and on that data you can run analysis to see how do employees feel. Yeah? How is the engagement? How is the motivation in the company? How is productivity? Is there attrition risk? Are people engaged?
So at the end, are they happy with their boss?
That's one factor. Yeah. And
will you raise capital again in the future?
We might. Yeah. So as I mentioned, Q1 next year is the first quarter that we're cash flow positive, which is great because it takes away pressure from going back to investors and asking for money. That being said, we see a lot of clear growth vectors. It continues to be true. The market we serve is humongous. There's 2.8 billion frontline workers. It's fragmented and it continues to be very underserved. Yeah, so we see some opportunities to accelerate and might go out. And we start now conversations with some potential partners on how that acceleration could look like.
So the next step, that means still expansion internationally or more into the verticals, or how does it look like?
Yeah. So our midterm vision is we believe there's an emerging software category. Yeah, at the moment, there's no Gartner Magic Quadrant for frontline technology. That doesn't exist. But we think 2-3 years from now it will. And we're building towards, we want to be top right in that quadrant and want to be a category leader. Maybe the same way that when you think about cloud, you may think about AWS. When you think about Salesforce, that's the leading CRM. And when people think about frontline tech, they should think about Beekeeper one day.
Okay. Any plans to IPO?
Maybe one day. Yeah. So
be a little bit more precise there?
Yeah, sure. So I think the market is big enough for 2-3 large companies that are public to serve that space. I think the market opportunity is really there. And for us to be in that size, we probably need another 2, 3, 4 years to get there, so it makes sense to IPO. We're building towards that. Chris, our CEO, and the team were very ambitious. Yeah, we want to build a really, really big business. And but at the moment, we're focused on building good product and serving our customers, and the rest will follow.
All right. So 9 out of 10 startups fail. In a nutshell, what did you do better than the rest?
I think the founders picked a real problem to solve. A pretty hard problem, but I picked a real problem that was there in a very non-digitized industry, the very large market. That's the first one. The second one, they were always very salesy. Yeah, they didn't first build a product and waited for people to come. They built together with customers, and sales was always something the company was good at. And at the end of the day, we did not run out of money.
Okay. And what advice, last question, would you give to a founder today, apart from not running out of money?
Yes. No, I think pick a hard problem, pick a real problem that people need, And secondly, ensure that you think about founder market fit. Yeah? Why you and why now? Why are you solving that?
All right. Thank you very much, Herbert Sablotny.
Thanks, Marc.